What's up, guys? This is TheKephas. Welcome everybody to another edition of WoW UIs with TheKephas. In this video, I'm going to do my very best to showcase my current user interface in World of Warcraft. We are currently looking at WoW Dragonflight, even though we're still in Shadowlands. And then we're also going to look at WoW Classic because the UIs that I use in both versions of the game are pretty much identical with some minor changes. And I'm going to do my best to show off my UI today, show you guys pretty much everything that I can think of that's significant, and then also maybe provide some profile links if you want, and maybe you can try these out yourself. I do get a lot of people asking about my UI and stuff like that. I did a video recently, but I honestly felt like that video didn't do enough justice, and I felt like I could do a better job of maybe showing everything off. So strap yourselves in. This might be a long video. I'm going to do my best to explain everything and yeah, show you guys what this is all about. So let's try to get into this. Like I said, we're going to do the best we can. The first thing that I'm going to do real quick, we're going to go down to add-ons, and I'm going to give you guys a quick list here. So that way for people that maybe want to know like what's your add-on list, you can kind of just go through here. I'm going to scroll relatively quickly, but feel free to pause and look through my UIs. If you have a question about anyone that I don't go over, feel free to look it up on Google. You can see what it does. If I was to try to go through every single add-on that I have, this video would be much longer than it's already going to be. So you can imagine why I'm choosing not to do that, even though I sometimes get requests. So this is the best I can do to maybe help you guys out. But we are going to go over some of these add-ons. The main add-ons that we're going to go over, because we're talking mainly about my UI, are the core components of my UI to how to make it work. The first thing is ElvUI. Now, WoW has a lot of UI customization that's added in now with a lot of the changes for Dragonflight, and I think that's great. But my specific needs as a visually impaired player, it doesn't fully meet those needs, so I still rely on ElvUI. Also, it's what I've been using and I'm comfortable with it. I don't like change. So I'm sticking with that for now, but I might, eventually mess around with the in-game UI. But ElvUI kind of covers most of the unit frames, nameplates and all those sorts of things. I also have a lot of plugins that I use with ElvUI. On top of that, the next biggest one, probably even more important, is ConsolePort. And that is the action bar on the bottom left part of the screen that kind of, mimics something like Final Fantasy's, cross hotbar. And then, that also is what enables me to play the game with the controller. It gives me a lot more robust options over what the default game has. So that's, kind of where that comes in. Big add-on. We're going to go over a lot of stuff from that. And then beyond that, there's, dynamic cam. That's what sets the camera off to the side, makes it look like something out of like, The Witcher, or, maybe Elden Ring, maybe a little bit, like just like an action kind of game kind of goes with that. I kind of just use the default profile, so, install dynamic cam and you're good to go. Beyond, those are like the main three, but then I also use immersion for, talking to NPCs and quests, and that works really well with ConsolePort. And then there's a couple of other add-ons that I use. Addy bags for my bags. I like how it organizes things. And then I use Sexy Map for my minimap. And as you can see, my minimap is not up on the screen at all times. I have that up toggleable with my controller set up through ConsolePort, and I use I kind of have my minimap pop up as I need it. And the reason why I will kind of get this disclaimer out, you guys, for those of you that may not know, I am visually impaired. Some of my UI elements might seem a little bit big, more than you might need. That's because I'm visually impaired and I need them to be bigger so that I can see them easily. For my minimap, the reason why I have it set up this way is it does no good for me being in the top right corner of the screen. I can't see it there, and really it's not something that I've come to realize I don't use it all the time. And if I don't need it all the time, then I don't need to have it on the screen all the time. I can just click a quick button and have it pop up as I need it. So if I'm farming ore, I'll pop it up and I'll run around and I'll just kind of look at the minimap, get my ore. I don't have to look away from the middle of the screen. I don't have to strain, and it's just what I use. I learned this trick from Final Fantasy using their, not their minimap, but like their secondary map. I have a toggle, the game lets you toggle like a secondary map. I use that a lot for quest tracking, and so I kind of applied the same kind of idea in WoW with this. Now, you don't need to use Addy bags or, Sexy Map. ElvUI has its own map replacements, but you can kind of turn things off modularly in ElvUI. You can use certain things and not use other things. That's entirely an option if you want. That's one of the nice things about ElvUI. But I prefer Sexy Map, and I also prefer Addy Bags over what ElvUI has, and also over what the base game has. That's why I use them. I also use Details Damage Meter, which I can toggle on and off with ElvUI as well, which is also very nice. Of course, I don't use detail meters very much, but when I'm making my macros, and like trying to get my macros designed the best I can, I usually use them to kind of measure how effective they are. But I'm not a big damage meter person anymore. I don't know. I don't really care that much, but it's there. I use details. And then of course my chat frame, I can also toggle on and off. It's over here on the left. So there you can see using my keyboard or my controller, I can toggle that on and off with a keybind through ConsolePort as well, through ElvUI. So ElvUI actually allows you to toggle a couple of panels, and so my chat frame is there. Again, I kind of like it having it higher up in the screen. It's easier to see. It's still not perfect for me because of my vision, but honestly, I have it toggled off most of the time anyway, so I don't really care that much. But yeah, so that's kind of like the core elements. Again, I use obviously GNOME Sequencer Enhanced to make more robust combat macros. I do an entire series based on that, so that's also an add-on that I use. But overall, that's pretty much the basics, I guess, like the introduction or whatever. So let's go ahead and get into this. We're going to first open up ElvUI. We'll start with ElvUI and we'll go from there. And of course, I will share my profile for both retail and classic. There are some minor changes. If you go down to profiles here, I'll copy this out, and then you can import it here. It's just going to be like a weird string of code. You can just import it in, and if you want to use this. So that's kind of the idea. And of course, like I said, you can kind of go in here. Everything's modular. I don't use the buff frames. I use buffs through my unit frames under the unit frame section. So I don't use this panel. I don't use the bag. I don't use the buff frames. I don't use the bag frames, and then I don't use the minimap frames either. So that's kind of the thing. Fonts, I don't even know what I use. People ask about that, so let me look here. Looks like I use this is set to Expressway, but I think what I actually use is this one. I don't even know where I found it. Not that one. Oh my gosh, you guys. I use this one. TheKephas Grotesque Bold is what I use. I use a bolder font to see. For combat, I use this one here. It's called BKAI I don't know. Big Kaboom, I guess. I don't know. I don't know where I found that. I just like the way the numbers look, so that's what I use for my font. So if you can find those fonts, I think you have to use like shared media or something to get them in. I honestly don't remember how I even set all that up. I apologize, but yeah, that's that. So we're not going to reset that now, but that's what I use usually. Yeah, so that's basically ElvUI. I forgot to look at ElvUI. Kind of doing this live because I don't want to forget anything. I want to be as thorough as possible. So I do use some plugins as well for ElvUI. So I use add-on skins, and that's what allows me to have the ElvUI skins over all of my other add-ons. If there are other frames, it'll do that. It'll also what allows me to put details into a panel for ElvUI, so I can toggle it on and off. So that's what that's for. Binnick UI is how mainly, there's a lot of cool things that it does, but the main thing for me, it's what lets me stylize my unit frames a little bit more. I have bigger, character, portrait, and different sized bars, that kind of stuff. That's all done through Binnick UI. Next up is Project Azraloka. This does a number of things. It lets me have like sound effects for certain things, like when I finish quests, which I like that kind of stuff. It also lets me have the eagle borders, or I think it's like an eagle, the elite borders around enemies that are elite or rare. It's like a nice reference here. I can click on her, so yeah, you can see I have it set up this way, so like there's like a border around her portrait. Without it, you don't have that with ElvUI, so that's kind of why, the main reason why I even have this add-on. It does a lot of other things as well. A lot of them I have turned off because I don't really want to use them, but for the most part, it's a pretty cool add-on. Shadow and Light, literally the main reason why I use this is for... Go away. Bye-bye. That's Wim, by the way, the instant messenger thing. for whispers. The main reason why I use Shadow and Light is specifically for the character screen. That's literally why I use that plugin. So there's that. And then the last one is Location Plus, and that's this little like Titan panel thing up here. You can kind of see this shows me my location, shows me my gold, and then shows me the time. That's all that's for. So it's really handy. It's nice and stylized. So that's basically the idea. So that's what ElvUI does. And then of course, you look down here, you can see my action bar. This is a ConsolePort. Also down here is a XP, well, it would be an XP bar if I was leveling up. And also, you would also see the percentage of XP right under Location Plus up here. I have that set up as well for when you're leveling up. You don't see it because this character's max level at the moment. So there, I have a couple of places where you can kind of reference that. Also, under my feet is a nameplate for myself. You know, and all the enemy nameplates look very similar, so that's also very handy. So I have a couple of like quick ways to look at my health. Again, very nice for someone like myself who is visually impaired. So that's kind of the idea there. And so yeah, so this is my action bar. Also, if you scroll down mouse over, the main action bar, like the primary, you know, main action bar where most of your most important spells go, is down here. The reason why I have this here is when you get into a vehicle, your action bar on ConsolePort disappears. It does pop up some tooltips, let you know what your abilities are, but if you need to reference, you know, what buttons, that's specifically why I have this here, because sometimes I don't know what buttons I'm supposed to press when I'm in a vehicle or when I get a special action or something like that. So that's kind of the idea there. But yeah, so that's basically ElvUI. And then, you know, the idea of my UI, my thinking was I wanted to kind of design it around Elden Ring, you know, like a modern, you know, kind of go along with the camera thing, like Elden Ring or God of War, Witcher, you know, that kind of thing. So that's kind of like what I wanted to try to style my UI around. That's kind of what I went for there. Of course, if you target something, as you saw, the target would be up here on the top right. So, you know, you've got that. You've also got nameplates for whenever it's an enemy, so you'll be able to see those very easily. So the idea is to have as much, you know, open screen as possible so that you're not really bombarded with UI stuff. You know, if you have a party or a raid, that'll be under your unit frame over here on the side. Obviously, if you want to move stuff, that's easy. In ElvUI, you just, you know, you open up ElvUI, you go down here to toggle anchors, and then you can just move things around as you want. Honestly, there are probably new things in here that I'm gonna have to move around. You know, we're kind of new into this. Some things are buggy, you know, there's different things like that, but you know, you can move things around as you want. So that's kind of the idea there. And that would also include your mini map, you know, whether you're using ElvUI. You know, if you don't like how I have that set up, you can completely set that up differently, you know, entirely up to what you want to do. So the next thing is ConsolePort. Now we can just, you know, obviously this is ConsolePort here. Kind of reminds me of the Final Fantasy. It's really neat. You know, when you pause, basically when I hit start on my controller, you know, I'm controlling everything with the controller for the most part. You have this cool menu where you can open up different panels. And yeah, so we're going to open up controls. This is for ConsolePort here. And yeah, this is pretty cool, man. Like, I love this add-on. It's incredible what you can do. You can kind of look here and see. Again, I will have this profile. This should also port in my action bar as well. So, you know, and you can also just kind of customize it if you want to. But yeah, you can look here and see the face buttons are all your action buttons. And then the D-pad is also action buttons as well. You know, things like, you know, left stick will target, even though I do the action targeting, the new thing. I still use tab targeting a lot, so I still have that set up. Right stick, you'll jump. And then, of course, you get into, like, you know, panel controls, and I do most of that with, you know, these other buttons as well. When you hold down left trigger, you get a whole new set of buttons, so more action button options. You know, right trigger, same thing, and then hold down both triggers and you get even more options. And that works for every single other button on the screen, even your bumpers, which I just specifically use bumpers for left click and right click. So that's what those are for. Now, if you import this, you might find a few buttons that aren't assigned, and that's probably because they're assigned to an add-on that you're not using that I am. You know, I use like livestock for controlling my mount. Obviously, ElvUI, you know, controls those panels, and I have that. If you can see here, it says left, and then it says right down here on the X on the bottom. You know, that's kind of what that's all about. And then, of course, I guess the biggest thing that I want to go over with this, obviously you can look through here and see what controls what and kind of experiment. You've got, your character panel, achievements, maps, all kinds of stuff. Even guild, I think I have a guild button in here for if you're in a guild. And you can obviously go in and change this if you want to. But the big thing I want to go over, I guess, to kind of try to explain it is, so if you look here, you can see that there's a cursor in the middle of my screen, and this is to kind of let me know where my mouse is supposed to be when I'm walking. So if you walk up to this NPC, okay, and normally right bumper is is right click. Now if you right click an NPC, you'll talk to them, but I have it set up so that right clicking on something works as an interact, okay? So it works as right click normally, but when you're near something that you can interact with, it will work as an interact. So you can talk to an NPC. If this crosshair is over them and you're in range and you right click, that's what that'll do. So if there's an object on the ground that you need to interact with, or you're looting a body, you're mining ore, picking an herb, you can cursor over that with this cursor, right click, and it pretty much always works. Now there's a failsafe. If that doesn't work and you're in range, you also have the interact with target button. Now I have that set up kind of weird. You have to hold down left trigger, right trigger, and hit the Xbox button, the X in the middle, or if you're on a PlayStation, I guess it would be like the PlayStation button. I don't know how it would switch it, but whatever button it is, you can look in there. It's interact with target, and it'll do the same thing. So it's kind of a fail safe if this other one doesn't work perfectly. In a perfect world, the way I'd have this set up is, and I think you can try to set up this way, but when I'm near something, I can press A to interact, kind of like how Final Fantasy does it. But there's a lot of issues with that, so I found it better to use like right click and then have an extra failsafe option. Obviously, the interact, the new interact features are really nice. They combine really well with the action targeting system that's in the game now, but it's still a work in progress, and I'm trying to figure it out. The other couple of cool things with ConsolePort is, for the way I have this set up, if you're playing like a healer, you actually have some cool options for playing healer with a controller and being able to interact with your party. Now, I'm not in a party right now, so I can't demonstrate this fully, but if I hold down left trigger and then hold down left stick, then you can look up at my unit frame on the top left, and you can see there's an A there now. What happens is if I click A and then let go of those buttons, I now just targeted myself. So if I have a party of 5, then I can prioritize my teammates. If I'm healing, I can hold down these buttons, left trigger and left stick, and then I can hit one of the other face buttons or whatever it assigns onto the unit frame, on the specific unit frame, and then I can hit that button and I can quickly target a person in my party very easily. There's another option that lets you like switch over to your unit frames, and then you can target someone with your D-pad. That's also very nice, but then that takes away the ability to have abilities to be used in the D-pad a little bit. So I didn't like that one, so I'm trying this one out right now. I actually haven't had a chance to fully use it yet, but it just seems like a really cool option, like ability to target your teammates. I don't think it would work great in a raid if you're a healer, but if you're doing like a dungeon, it might work out pretty well if you're really good at fast clicking and comboing. It really isn't that hard. A lot of this stuff is muscle memory. So like if you're used to playing with a keyboard and mouse, you could never do this. You absolutely can play this way. It's just muscle memory, so it's just, when you get used to it, you're just as fast, really. And you're also not getting carpal tunnel, right? So, that's kind of the idea there. So it kind of works like that. The last thing that I can think of that I want to talk about are the utility rings. Now, these are really cool, okay? So ElvUI, or not ElvUI, but ConsolePort allows you to have utility rings, and what they do is you can make all kinds of different utility rings, and they will allow you to put different abilities in them. So if I hold down both triggers, you can look down at my action bar here, and you can see that when I have both triggers held down and I use a directional button, a D-pad button, I will activate a different utility ring. So I hold that down, so I'm hitting direction pad down, and then I can use right stick to select a different option in this utility ring, and I can switch my auras as a paladin. So the 4 that I have set up, and sorry I'm moving away from my microphone nearsighted, I have class, professions, travel, and then the basic utility ring, okay? So that's how these work. So you actually have to, like, on each character, it's kind of annoying, you actually have to go in and set these up yourself. So when you go to rings, if you make you won't have any rings by default, but these will still be set up. I know that doesn't make any sense, but that's how ConsolePort is working for me. So if you make a new ring and you don't have any rings, you make a new ring and you name it class, then it will automatically keybind that ring for you, and then you can put in whatever abilities you want. So class is for, like, you know, your pets if you're a hunter, or your shape-shifting forms if you're a druid, your auras if you're a paladin, stuff like that. And then professions are kind of self-explanatory. The problem with professions in retail WoW, this isn't a problem in Classic, but in retail WoW, professions are like in a different panel. The only way I could get them in a ring was to make a macro for them. Kind of dumb, but that's just what it is. I don't think it's necessarily the add-ons fault. So these are all macros that I made: jewel crafting, archaeology, and cooking. And that way I can kind of go in and set the macros. You know, under this here, I can set these macros and I can put them in the ring, and then I can access my professions with the ring. And then, of course, travel is the next one. That's for hearthstones. You know, you could even put your mage portals in there if you want to. You know, if you're a monk, you can travel, you know, using whatever the ability is called to travel to the temple to do your thing there. You know, different travel forms, obviously, is what that's for. And then, of course, lastly is the utility ring. Now, this one I can't get to work. I'm actually trying to access the utility ring now. That is actually a default ring. Everybody has it by default. You just set that automatically. And what that's supposed to do is it's supposed to put in, like, quest items in there. So, like, if you get a quest, they give you a quest item, it's supposed to go into that utility ring. And I cannot seem to get that to work. I can't get it to work in Classic or Retail. I remember a time in the past when it worked, and for whatever reason, I can't get it to work. It's supposed to do it by default and automatically assign them. And so if anybody out there knows how to get the utility ring to work, that'd be great. I have it set up now just in case, you know, I might be able to figure it out someday. So whenever the rings are being weird and they're not working, I also have OPI as an add-on. Kind of does the same thing, but it doesn't work as well with the controller, so I kind of use it with my mouse. So yeah, that's kind of the idea there. But yeah, the utility rings are cool. I'm still kind of experimenting with them. They don't always work perfectly, but there you see I just accessed my archaeology, and then, you know, Hearthstone, same thing. I can use that. I also put my travelers or my Great Expedition Yak, or Traveler's Tundra Mammoth, you know, that stuff, so that way I can quickly access, you know, and you know, the ability to sell things or whatever. So that's kind of the idea there. So yeah, the rings are cool, but like I said, still a work in progress. And then something I just actually recently discovered is, at least on Xbox now, and I'm sure it works on PlayStation too with the different buttons that you have. I'm using an Xbox Series S controller, XS, whatever, and I can set my share button to hotkeys on ConsolePort. I can't get this to work. I can assign buttons to it, like I can assign commands, but the button itself in WoW doesn't seem to work right now. So I don't know if there's something I have to do to get that set up, but that would provide 4 more buttons, which is great. So if I ever figure that out, that'd be cool. But right now it's just kind of assigned to something random. And I can't get it to work, so just know, if you can get it to work, that's cool. Maybe you're using a touchpad. If you're using a PlayStation, if you have a Switch controller, you get extra buttons as well. So if you can get those to work, that's awesome, but I haven't figured it out yet. So again, if you know, feel free to let me know. But yeah, so there you guys go. There's the action bar for ConsolePort. Obviously, if you're playing a hunter, you'll have a pet ring down here as well. Also, your pet will be displayed right in this area, your pet's health and stuff like that as well. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So anyways, you guys, that's pretty much everything I can think of. One last thing I will say, for people that ask, you know, when you're using, you know, GNOME sequencer, you know, and you're kind of rapidly pressing, you know, you can use it's okay to use rapid fire buttons. WoW doesn't seem to have a problem with that, so it's fine. As far as I know, I mean, don't take my word to the bank, take my word for a grain of salt, but that's just my understanding. It's not the same thing as like using a bot. You still have to press the button. So GNOME sequencer buttons work really well with rapid fire. The way I get those to work is I assign hotkeys, the same hotkey through a program called WASD. So I assign the same hotkey to that, and then I let it be a rapid fire button. So it's a controller program that I use to make that happen. It's like using, you know, a Razer program to do it with your mouse or whatever. So that's how I make that work. So anyways, for those of you who are wondering, look into WASD if you're playing with a controller. They don't seem to care, so unless something changes, I'm not worried about it. If they suddenly decide to care, then I'll stop doing it, and that's fine, but I don't think they care. So anyway, I wanted to kind of cover that while we're talking about UI stuff. So otherwise, you guys, that's pretty much everything that I can think of for my UI. It's a lot of stuff to cover. I hope I explained it pretty well. Hopefully I didn't miss anything either, but let's go ahead and, excuse me, Mr. Angel Buddy. We're going to move over to Classic, and I'm going to show you guys the UI there. All right, so we are now in Classic version of WoW, and as you can see, the UI is pretty much the exact same. There are some minor differences that I will go over, but I'm basically using the exact same add-ons, just the Classic versions. By the way, you can find all these add-ons on Curse Forge, except for the ElvUI stuff. That stuff you'd find on ElvUI's website. Actually, I think you can find a lot of that stuff on CurseForge as well. But yeah, for the most part, it's all pretty much the exact same. I use the same add-ons. I use Addy Bags. I use Sexy Map. You know, obviously there are some minor changes here, you know, with how the game plays. It's still classic, so there is no like dynamic nameplate. I have that fixed right under your feet. So obviously that's kind of put in place, but you can move that manually if you want to. You can still toggle bags, as you can see now or you can toggle frames, chat frame, damage meter, that kind of stuff. Still have all the same add-ons, works the same way. If you have a pet, don't worry. If you are keeping track of its happiness, that is built into the I've got it set up through the UI, so you will see a pet happiness frame next to your pet's health. If you're playing a hunter, that kind of stuff. You can see there's extra bars here if you're playing different classes that have, you know, like aura bars, that kind of stuff. That'll all be right above your action bars, so you've got that covered as well. And then of course you still have the same, you know, utility rings. They're oddly a lot easier to set up in Classic. So again, they're the same. The big difference is that you now have Class A and Class B instead of travel. There really aren't a lot of travel buttons in Classic, but there are a lot more class, you know, abilities. Like hunters have aspects, and they have pets. Paladins have seals, and they have auras. You know, so there's a lot more class, you know, abilities that you could kind of group up into some rings. And of course, obviously professions. These are much easier to set up in Classic because they're actually spells in Classic. So yeah, so it was a lot easier. But again, you will have to name them. Still trying to get the utility ring to work though. When I click on that, it doesn't work. The only thing that I will say with the utility rings in Classic is they don't update when you get a new rank. Okay, so if you get a new rank, you will have to go into your utility rings into ConsolePort, and you will have to get rid of the old rank and put the new rank in. It's really tedious, but at end game, it's great. So for when you're leveling up, it's not that useful, to be honest. Just, you know, kind of control them manually. But when you get into end game, it gets a lot better. So just keep that in mind. Now, the other thing is in ElvUI, I have a bar hidden. So I've still got the same main bar hidden down here if you need it. But I also have a second bar. It has two buttons on it, and they're controlled through, they have ConsolePort keybinds. And they are for your mount and also for your Hearthstone. So that way you can easily control those. And so the way I have it set up is just like in retail, they're kind of the same buttons really. When you hold down right trigger and hit start, you'll mount up. Now I use a mod called like Classic Mount Journal or something like that, and it lets me set up a smart mount. So like livestock doesn't work for Classic, so I think I use one called like Mount Journal, Classic Mount Journal, something like that. Lets me do the same thing. And then for Hearthstone, it's left trigger, right trigger, and then the Xbox button. So what would be the interact key on retail is actually your Hearthstone in Classic, and that's set up through that action bar. So if you see a hidden action bar here, you can just slide your Hearthstone down there, and then slide your mount down there, and then you've got those buttons as well. But again, you can go into ConsolePort and you can see what the buttons all do. There might be some minor changes in here. Again, there's just a few different buttons that maybe do a couple of different things, but for the most part, it works the exact same way. You know, mostly the same panels, just some minor changes because it is Classic. I really can't think of anything else in the classic version that's any different, obviously, aside from just it being classic. The camera is a little bit more stiff and maybe slightly different in classic. Like I said, I just use dynamic cam's default. So I will have links down in the description for each thing. It'll be on a paste bin, so there will be a classic and retail version for each of ElvUI and ConsolePort. If you download those add-ons, you can import them in, and yeah, so then you can just kind of jump right in, import those into your game, and you should be good to go. For ElvUI, my UI should be called TheKephas. So pretty straightforward stuff. Hopefully I didn't miss anything, you guys. It is a lot to go over, so I do apologize if I did. But there you guys go. I hope this was helpful and informative, and if you want to learn how to play the controller, at least now you have an option. Though feel free to try your own thing and see what you can come up with. Maybe you can come up with something even better than what I've done here. But otherwise, I thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate such an enthusiastic interest in my UI design. I'm not the best, but it works for me. So yeah, thank you guys so much for being a part of my channels, for being always so supportive and what's the word I'm trying to say? Inquiring, I guess. So I hope that I answered your questions. Otherwise, I will see you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.